on the framing of the finale,
Mm-hmm.
in that narratively it is structured like that's not the end, like that it is a obviously sort of still has a story to finish for Jack based on his edit. No, it's okay. I asked her if you would be allowed to talk about it, but I also know you don't have 1501 yet, so it's fine. Rich has been running around at conventions being like, don't worry, Alex still has a job, by the way, to people. So
It's great for Rich to really be my spokesperson.
Sorry.
It's good.
Let's go backwards though. You've died twice since I last interviewed you, which is more than most people do. But that journey for Jack is, in my opinion, the physical, tangible example of everything that the show has done over the past 15 years in terms of the narrative of determinism versus free will, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so this season was obviously the peak of that for Jack, 14, in kind of finding that, finally coming to terms with all he can be, you know, with a soul or without a soul. And I'm just wondering about that aspect, the kind of nature or nurture, free will aspect of the character, how that has, like, how that story has progressed for you in terms of how you think about Jack.
I don't know. It's a really, I like how clearly you kind of stated that, because the show totally has been, is everything determined or is it free will? And what I loved about the finale and what the Chuck character always represents.
Because it's all now tossed out and scattered across the floor. The whole methodology of the show.
I love that he's the writer, especially you knowing the writer. It's kind of more fun, and like thinking about, like, you know, what how they kind of write for that character too is also kind of fun, because he says, you know, he's like, you guys are my favorite show. Yeah,
it was so dark. It was so good and so dark.
No, but I like that aspect of it, and I like whenever this show goes a little bit philosophical or meta. Like, I really enjoy that. So for Jack, I think he was taught, I think like most of us are, that we have a choice, that we can choose, you know, to be good or to be evil, and that's kind of really what was drilled into Jack. But maybe a bad way to say that. But by the finale, I was really interested, because I was getting these pages and I was like, what's gonna happen? Like, how is he gonna, you know, is he gonna rebel against them? Is he gonna just try to destroy everything? But instead, I really wanted to play that moment to the peak of just like, what's he gonna do? We don't know. And then the resignation, the dropping to his knees, the just acceptance of fate. And that for me was the biggest moment for Jack, to just kind of be like, I've completed my story, I've fulfilled my bit, and this is as far as my decisions have taken me to this fate, to this cliff. So I was just trying to play a little bit of the opposite, just so when that did happen, that we would maybe feel a little more, or that it would resonate more.
Yeah, and I mean, that's obviously what Chuck was going for. You know, he's standing there being like, shoot him, do it. He wanted to see that narrative choice happen for his own glee or whatever.
Yeah.
And then everything kind of gets, you know, tipped up and started again for the guys, because they break that fate.
Yeah, exactly, because Jack accepts his fate, and then Chuck wants to bully them into that corner to force them to choose, but instead they push back against it, which is kind of the fighting against the God complex and the fate, right?
I mean, the theme of the show being that free will versus determinism, you know, right back, I don't know how far you've studied the show, right back in like season 4 or 5 or something, there's the first appearance of Michael, the only time Dean meets the real Michael from this world. He said he has this conversation with him about fighting, about that you can't like fight fate. It's Matt Cohen plays him in this episode, and he says, like, you can't fight City Hall, and that's always been like the big question. And to find out now that everything that they've done to go against what the world wanted for them was a lie, it was always going to be like right that the final battle of Supernatural was fighting for free will.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask two things. What was it like for the group, like the core cast of you four guys, finding out that Chuck arc in the finale? Like, what was the reaction, sort of seeing how that twist was brought to you guys?
Well, I can't speak for the rest of the cast.
Yeah.
Obviously, because they're not here.
Yeah.
But I like that it was setting us up for something, and then at the last second, kind of the rug kind of got tugged out from under us as a viewer. So for me, I want to see the audience have the best time, right? So that for me, that twist, I was like, great, this will throw them on their ass. I don't know. I guess a lot of the times I'm not thinking about it from my perspective. I'm just thinking about it in terms of story. I'm just thinking about how people at home are how they're gonna take it.
It was interesting because Chuck's appearance was fairly well known when the episode aired. Like the fact that he was going to be in the episode was already spoiled, if not officially confirmed. It was spoiled quite heavily, but it still did that rug yank in an immense way. Obviously, Jack got to that point of burning off all of his soul because of the preceding efforts to be good, use his magic, use his powers, save people, which climaxed in the death of Mary, who is one of my favourite characters as well.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it was an interesting arc to watch. It was kind of like she was on borrowed time anyway, so it's kind of like not as horrible as it could be. But Jack and Mary had a relationship, like canonically, that we didn't get to spend too much time on screen because of the private time trapped in the apocalypse world that they spent that we didn't see on camera a lot. So what was it like filming those final scenes with Sam and the dynamic between you two whenever the short times that you did interact, knowing that you had this sort of fictional history?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's fun about TV is like the kind of the fictional history for us, like kind of actually was like a real history.
Yeah.
Like from me meeting, Sam for the first time, to our just kind of friendship developing over these past 2 years, and you're shooting these long hours together, and you're out in the mud. So it's like you do really bond. Yeah, and like I'm so fond of her as a person. So I really think even in those brief moments that we had together, I hope that translated on the screen, because for me, by the end of it, it was like I had Kelly Klein, who was my mom, but I always felt like Sam was like my apocalypse mom, is kind of what I kept saying.
Yeah, for sure.
So even if it was short, I feel like that relationship was super important for Jack, and she really took him under her wing, kind of as another child.
Yeah.
So I felt terrible. We were shooting these scenes that I have to be, yelling at her, and that I'm kind of in my own thing, and that I snap on her. It was upsetting. That it's like not real, but like there was, if someone significant dies on the show, what they do is they'll like set them up a slideshow, and they'll have it edited.
Like if it's their real final
if it's their final app, So we did that for Sam, and just people are crying, and these people have been in each other's lives for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I'm such a small chunk of that, but to like have that built into like the writing and the character's experience, I think it all made it very real for me very quickly. It was super tough. Yeah,
I mean, obviously the relationship between Jack and the boys becomes a bit fractured because of that death, and it's kind of interesting to try and define where that's because he doesn't have a soul, or whether it's something that when Jack was whole again, depending on where he went, if that's something that the boys could get past, like living with him, being with him, having killed Mary.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's after Mary dies, Dean accepts her death. Like they try to bring her back and they can't, and it's the first time that we really see the boys be like, okay, we're not going to try. This is the end, and that's kind of a journey that they've failed at many times over the years with each other, times when they realistically should have died but couldn't let go, or things like that. And in season 14, they had it with Jack. Jack's first death, he died. he was gone, they forced him back to life, basically, because that's what they do. And so it's very interesting that they kind of did that, relived that cycle with Jack, and then when he killed Mary, that was kind of what we would hope was the end of that sort of cycle of accepting death for what it is. Going back to that episode Byzantium in the middle of the season where Jack did die for the first time in that sort of tragic and beautiful way, we tapped into Mary a bit there with Dean calling her, and even though Sam wasn't listed for the episode, like playing into that relationship. But what was that heaven experience like, and that the death and your first death and rebirth, basically?
Not as dramatic for me as it was probably for viewers, just because I had the next episode.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of like,
not emotionally, but just like how you approach that.
No, I'm just prefacing that.
Yeah.
I just like that I got to go to heaven, which I found very like Kubrick-esque, which I loved, just aesthetic-wise, and how some of the shots. I think I actually posted some to Twitter just because I really loved how it looked, and I just kept thinking Space Odyssey. So that for me was just fun that way, and we didn't spend a lot of time there, but I think it's interesting to look at how your life is kind of reviewed in a way, and just to kind of have those little moments before Jack gets, sucked back to the
his
real
heaven
world.
memories
kind of interesting.
Were very cool, like going back to the previous, like an unseen sequence that was during a previous episode as that heaven memory. Obviously it's sort of climaxed in that deal that Castiel makes with the Empty for Jack's life, which is all sort of interestingly moot now because Jack is no longer with us. But I mean, I don't know how that's going to play out, but
it's not our jobs.
No, it's do you think that he wanted to live, Jack, rather than Cass? Do you think that he came back because he felt needed by the others, or do you think because he seemed like he was okay with being done, like when he died from his illness?
Yeah, he's been kind of tragic that way, just where whatever, keeps accepting death. And the first time he dies is kind of in that tragic kind of just way where, he just goes, okay, this is what's happening. This is fate, or whatever that means for our show. And he did at the end of the season too. So I don't know. I think Jack feels a little doomed in a lot of ways. Just to live this kind of Winchester doomed ass kind of life. Yeah, never really thought about that, but he's been very, very accepting of maybe the end of his own life and what purpose that serves.
It's such a fascinating character. And what you're saying about the way that heaven looks and stuff. I don't know. This is not like, I did not bring this as a prop. I'm legitimately rereading this book at the moment. Have you ever read this book, Good Omens?
No, but how do you say Neil?
Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, he's all over the place right now.
He's a very good friend of mine for the past 10 years.
Oh,
but
really?
This is the first book of his I ever read before I knew him. I will bring you a copy of this book on Sunday to the convention because it is Jack's story. It is what Jack is based on. It's about an antichrist, son of Lucifer, who is basically raised that the people trying to raise him to be evil raised the wrong kid, and so it's this kid left to his own devices with nature versus nurture story. They've just made it into a television show
right.
after 30 years, and it's very interesting because this is written before Supernatural. Crowley in Supernatural is named after the demon Crowley in this book. Like, it's a known influence on the show. But it's interesting because as soon as Jack came into the show, the Adam, the Antichrist in this book, he's only 11. He's not like an adult baby like you. It
turns out working with kids sucks. That's why they had to cast me.
Yeah, I think it's a great decision. It's very hard to do the baby to adult thing well, and they really nailed it. It's interesting, unless it would like colour your view of Jack. This is a huge inspiration for not only the show Supernatural, but for Jack's character specifically. And in the show, their version of heaven looks very much like Supernatural's heaven, so I think it's fed back in because the heaven is not described in the book. Supernatural, the show existed before the television version of Good Omens. So it's interesting crossover that you mentioned with that. But just to kind
Are
of...
Dab and him buddies? Is that a thing too?
No, Kripke was.
Oh, Kripke is.
But it's trickled through. Dab has put in a lot of references. Billy, like the first time she's seen on screen is reading the Death comic from Sandman that Emma wrote and stuff. But, I mean, I won't ask you about 15 because you don't know and can't say. But the news that the show is ending, what was that like to kind of be a part of that that period where it was announced that the show was ending and everyone was kind of like the crew and cast were making that decision and coming to terms with the end of the show?
I think it's going to be something that we deal with in season 15 as that kind of is ongoing. I was there when they announced it to the crew.
What was that like?
I think they just really wanted to be respectful of not only people's jobs and careers. Knowing that there's an endpoint gives people, this is just like, industry shit.
Yeah, no, it's
it gives people an opportunity to, if they
look
want to,
for more.
if they want to go somewhere else.
I know
or
Russ,
start
the
something
location
else.
manager, has left for Sabrina, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Sabrina's there, Riverdale's there, Flash, Arrow, whatever. But I think it's a good way to do respect-wise. Just people have raised their families on this show, and they've bought houses because of this show. It's just so. I think it's just been a huge chunk of people's lives, and they just want to be respectful of that coming to an end. But I think really the feelings and like the rest of it is just kind of going to be surprises and unfolding for the rest of the year. I think it's going to kind of be interesting that way.
As a person invested in the show, regardless of whether you'll appear or not, what would you want from season 15?
I keep saying the same thing, but I mean, I love that there's going to be an ending. I think open-endedness is something that we experience in life, which kind of sucks because it's always, our only real salvation or the end is death. But what I love about finality about this series is going to be that I just want some sort of peace for the boys and for the family, and they've been through a lot. Yeah. So I really just want them to have
something better than they ever expected.
I don't know about better, but just something that's just gives them some sort of beautiful serenity, as opposed to the violence and the struggle and losing family members. And I just want the viewers and the boys just to feel like be able to take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's really lovely. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, good to see you again.
See you in San Diego, presumably that they've announced you by then.